Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. It's great to see you all again. I'm very happy to be here. As we begin our session today, like usual, let's take a moment to be very intentional. Whatever worldly activities have been occupying our time all day today, whatever running around we've been doing, let's put those to the side. Let's let ourselves be fully present. Let's create a sacred space for ourselves, no matter where we are, that we can engage in the Holy Dharma in a meaningful way. And as we do that, let's set a strong motivation that the reason we've come together today to study this precious text, to learn how to practice, is not simply for our own benefit alone, but so that we might be able to benefit others. We recognize that the best way to live a life full of peace and contemplation is to work in order to achieve Buddhahood so we might be a maximum benefit to others. And that is how we can find peace in this life and in all future lives as well. So set a strong motivation that I'm going to continue to study these holy teachings and work for the benefit of others, uh, and use these teachings as an opportunity to deepen my understanding of the Dharma and my practice of the Dharma. And with that motivation, let's offer our preliminary prayers. So we will offer refuge and bodhicitta 3 times in Tibetan and then once in English. Sorry. Sangye cheran soki chonam lai chanchu bardo dagni kyabsu chi dagi jinsogi pesonam gi chola pencher sangye dru parsho sangye cheran soki chonam la chanchu bardo dagni kyabsu chi dagi jinsogi pesonam gi Kyola Pincher Sange Drupar Shok Sange Chudan Soki Chonam La Chanchu Bardo Dagni Kyabsuji Dagi Jinsogi Pesonam Gi Drola Pincher Sange Drupar Shok. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and the other perfections, may I become Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain unto the end of cyclic existence, and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits, and those of all others, to the great enlightenment. We'll offer Mandala offering once in Tibetan, and then again in English. Om Sa Shi Pi Ki Joy Xing Me To Try Bling Shi Ni de gen pa Sange Shindu Mikte Wai Jokin Namanda Kshin La Clipper. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and I offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Hidam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. We'll continue with offering prayers to Shakyamuni Buddha. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme God of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme God of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides and then said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, forms supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free like you, the 3 worlds are not, incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, to the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all 3 ever devout homage. To all, worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms, atoms, in all aspects, with supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see, condition things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. We'll continue with the Heart Sutra. I prostrate to the Arya triple gem. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagwan was dwelling on Mount Vulture's mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagwan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that And the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya of Lokiteshvara said this to the venerable Sharadvatiputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no I element and so on up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance and no extinction of ignorance and so on up to and including no aging and death and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly, completely awakened to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment and reliance upon the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as the truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata om gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi swaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagwan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya of Lokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated, and even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagwan, having thus spoken, the venerable Sharadvatiputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya of Lokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, who are overjoyed and humbly praise that which had been spoken by the Bhagawan. And we'll conclude with a quick prayer to avert obstacles to our time together today. I prostrate to the gathering of dakinis and the three chakras who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanation, look after practitioners like a mother her child. Akasamarta Shadara Samaraya Pe, Akasamarta Shadara Samya Pe, Akasamarta Shadara. Akasamarata Shadara Samaraya Pe Tayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Swaha. By the teachings of the three supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed. May they be dispelled. May they be pacified. Shintam Kuriya Swaha. May all negative forces opposed to Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma. And may there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here, right now. Great. Thank you so much. So, before we begin today, I wanted to mention that last week I received some feedback that I was maybe going a little too quickly for some people. And it wasn't clear through the feedback if I was just speaking too quickly, or if we're going too quickly through the text, or if when I'm reading the text, I'm reading too quickly, or some combination thereof. So I will try to go a little more slowly this time. But the truth is, two things to say about that. One is that I do hope you read the text before this class. So when I am reading the text, I've been reading it somewhat quickly because I anticipate this is not the first time you've seen it. And I just want us to kind of be on the same page. But I also know that most of you have the PDF because it is over 300 pages. Printing it is a pain. And so trying to look at the PDF and look at the screen and do all these things is difficult. I appreciate that. So I will try to go a little more slowly so we can all stay at the same place when I do read. But I do hope that you've read it beforehand. So this shouldn't be the first time you're hearing it when I read it. And then the other thing to say is simply that in this kind of format, I can see some of your faces, not all of you, but even if I could see all of you, it's hard to tell if you're on track with me. You know, when I'm in space with you, if I'm going too quickly or if it seems like people don't understand something, then I can slow down, I can repeat because I can get a vibe of the room. It's hard to get a vibe on Zoom. At least it's hard for me. That's one of my many faults is that I have a hard time reading the room on Zoom, which means that if I am going too quickly, or if there is something that you don't quite understand and I just blow past it, then you can either stop and ask me to slow down, or you can give feedback to me after the class, or give feedback to someone at CKSL, and we'll try to adjust it going forward. But with these online classes, it's difficult for me to really know if everyone's on the same page as not. So I apologize for being too speedy. Um, and we'll work together in the future to make sure we all are going at a pace that is useful for all of us, right? Um, so with that said, there were some questions from last week that I got sent by a student, and I thought I would address those today because I'm sure other people had similar questions about some of the material that we covered last week. And so I'll address those, and then we'll go on from there. But as always, you're free to ask questions at any point in the teaching. Just interrupt me politely if there is a question, and we'll have some time at the end for questions as well. So just so we are on the same page, we will be starting on page 38 today on Precious Human Rebirth. That's where we are. But the first question is going back to page 34. And this is asking questions about the section on what to do in the periods between sessions, where he says that basically in between meditation sessions, you should be either accumulating the collection of conditions that are favorable to the arising of your positive qualities, or you should be working to purify your adverse conditions to practice, and you should be relying on ethical discipline in order to do that. And so the question is, what really does that mean? So I think it's important to recognize that what he's saying here is we need to learn the title of this outline is how to enhance the object of meditation between sessions. So what he's really pointing at is specifically in a retreat context, but we can then apply it to our everyday life as well. In between your meditation sessions, the goal should never to forget the object of your meditation. So if you're meditating on perfect human rebirth and you're doing 4 sessions a day that are meditating on perfect human rebirth, in between those sessions, you're not still meditating, but you shouldn't be forgetting the object of your meditation. And in the same way, he says, the main point is that if you make an effort at the essence in the session, then during the intervals in which you leave the session, if you let go carelessly without relying on mindfulness and introspection regarding the observed object and the aspect which are the causes of sustaining meditation, the outcome will be very little. So the observed object is whatever it is your meditative object is for that session. So if you're meditating on perfect human rebirth, then if you're trying to keep some sort of mindfulness focused on that object. And then the next part where he says, the aspect which are the causes of sustaining the meditation, which is to say, any Dharma activity is going to help sustain your meditation. So in between sessions, if you are not being mindful, if you're not making sure your introspection is engaged and you just act carelessly, then no matter how much you've tamed your mind during the meditation session, you can lose it all very quickly in between sessions, right? So specifically, that's what he's talking about. So yes, we are accumulating positive conditions to help our meditation be stronger, right? You're accumulating the karmic conditions that allow your realizations to ripen more forcefully, but also you're just ensuring that the work you do in your meditation sessions aren't lost. So specifically, when you're thinking of in a retreat environment, that is what he's talking about. Now, outside of a retreat environment, what does that mean for us, right? In our everyday life, the takeaway from this is that when you're not on your cushion, right, then you're in between sessions. So you should think of everything you do during the day as being in between meditation sessions, right? You should understand your daily experience as being in between meditation sessions. And so what you can keep as your observed object, which is to say the object of your meditation, is just virtue or virtuous activity, right? So at all times during the day, you should try to have a sense of mindfulness, right? Mindfulness is a mental factor that is a type of memory that is focused on an object. Always have mindfulness that is directed at virtue or virtuous activity, right? If you don't want to have a specific meditation topic, you could do a specific meditation topic during the day as well. That'd be harder if you're living an everyday normal life, right? But try to always have a mindfulness that is directed at virtue and virtuous activity, no matter what you do. And then always try to be aware of your activities using introspection to make sure you're avoiding non-virtue and that you are not creating conditions that will hamper your ability to achieve any sort of meditative progress or stability. Right. So that's what he's really pointing at here. It's in between meditation sessions, whether it's in a retreat environment or whether it is our daily life, we should be working to make sure that we're not losing all of our gains in those sessions, right? Which is to say, we should always keep our mind focused on virtue. We should be avoiding non-virtue, and we should be making sure we're not putting ourselves into environments or conditions that lead towards non-virtue as well. And then in the process, and what he says at the end of this section, or the end of that, the end of that section is the strongest and most important thing you can do is you rely on the basis of everything, which is ethics, ethical behavior, right? Your moral behavior is going to be the strongest basis for all of your practices and for developing a strength of meditative realization, developing bodhicitta, developing all of our realizations. Ethical discipline is going to be at the heart of everything we do, right? So that's kind of the main point of that section. Hopefully that clears that up a little bit. The other questions were about on page 36. We're talking about different types of meditation, right? So the first question had to do with the 4 activities and the 3 objects. So the activities of giving away, guarding, purifying, and increasing with regard to the 3 objects of the body and the possessions and the roots of virtue. And the other question was a little more general about analytical meditation and calm abiding meditation and the distinction between those two that Tsongkhapa is making here. So what's important to recognize in this section is specifically what he's doing. And he does the same thing in the Lamrim Chemo. You can see there, much of this is word for word from the Lamrim Chemo as well, is he is clearing up an argument that, we always talk about the study, contemplation, and meditation, right? These 3 activities that we should be doing all the time. And subsequently, from those 3 activities, you have the wisdom that arises from study, the wisdom that arises from contemplation, and the wisdom that arises from meditation, right? So you have the 3 activities, and then you have the wisdoms that arise from those activities as well. And there are opponents or other traditions who suggest that when you get to meditation, the third of those, that has no analytical meditation at all. So study or hearing and reflection both have analytical meditation, but meditation itself should only be non-analytical meditation, right? And he's saying that is not true. And so to argue against that, he brings in 2 quotes. The first quote is from the Ornament of Mahayana Sutras, the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara. And the second quote is from the Ornament for Clear Realization, the Abhisamaya Alamkara. And so in both these quotes, what he's doing is pointing at the fact. So specifically with these 4 activities and the 3 objects, he's saying that meditation on these 4 activities and the 3 objects, so these 12 different permutations, there are analytical versions of this as well as non-analytical versions of this. And therefore, these meditations should be done on all 3 of study, contemplation, and meditation. So that's the reason he's bringing these up. So these are things we should be meditating on as well as acting out in our life. So if we want to just clarify them a little bit, the idea of he says, thus you should practice meditation continuously doing these things. So it's in your meditation doing these things. But so what does it mean to give away our body in this context, whether in meditation or in our practice? So in our meditation, we'd be giving away our body in an actual way, right? Giving away our body to feed hungry beings if we want. But in our practice, what it means to give away our body is to actually use our body for Dharma, right? Whether that means being in service to the Guru or to the Dharma Center, or engaging in prostrations, or using our body to practice Dharma, is what especially to serve others and practicing the Dharma, means to give away our body in this context and the act of it. But to meditate on giving away your body, there are many different things you can do, right? You can imagine meditating on giving away your body in order to help develop compassion and bodhicitta. So what does it mean then to guard your body? So to guard your body, in general, the advice is to make sure your body is strong, to make sure your body is able to fulfill the goals of practicing Dharma, whatever that may mean, right? So taking care of your body, eating healthy foods, developing whatever kind of strength you can, taking medicine when you're ill, and these things are considered guarding your body. So you're making your body useful to engage in Dharma practice to the best of your ability with whatever resources you have, right? So it's not like protecting your body. It's not like, putting up a barbed wire fence around your body. Guarding your body means making your body useful in that way. And then purifying your body, obviously, you can think of as cleaning, as even in your daily bathing and showering and so forth, but making your body an object which is appropriate to be given to the Buddhas, right? So in that way, you purify the body. And the idea of multiplying the body. Why are we always talking about multiplying the body? Especially like when we do prostrations, we're supposed to envision multiple versions of our body and so forth. Um, on one hand, when we're making any sort of offering, to multiply it is just to give more, right? Because our offerings are power of our mind, right? So if you multiply your body, then you're able to just accomplish more with these visualized bodies. It also has to do with, when we prostrate, they say that the more ground you cover, the more merit you accumulate, which, that you find that in the teachings from the Buddha. It's not just like a superstition, but it is a little silly to think of, is that if I can think of, a King Kong sized body, I'll get more merit. But the purpose is that our prostration, like just laying your body on the ground, right? That isn't about, you don't get merit from just putting your body on the ground, right? That doesn't matter. What matters is the mental activity that you're using to propel yourself in that physical action of prostration. It's the mental activity that propels you to recite prayers, to recite a refuge prayer, right? So yes, that is merit that's accumulated through your speech and through your body, but it is necessarily preceded by these mental actions. So the stronger and more robust you can make that mental action, then the more powerful and the greater the merit's going to be. So multiplying your body in that way is for the sake of both improving your ability to visualize, which becomes important the more meditation you do, and also increasing your merit just by making your offering or your prostration or whatever it may be more robust, making it bigger, right? So that is the way you can apply those four things to your body. And then you can think similar things for possession and the merit as well, right? The root of virtue is to say the merit you've accumulated. So even though giving something away and guarding it sound contradictory, they're not in this case, right? So, for instance, giving away your merit is dedicating your merit to others at the end of any practice. Guarding your merit is also dedicating your merit to others, because when you dedicate it to others, it can't be destroyed by you generating a mind of anger, right? So the very act of you trying to give away your merit is the act of guarding it. So you are generous with your merit and you are protecting it at the same time, right? Um, if you the act of rejoicing increases your merit. So if you want to multiply your merit, it's through rejoicing that you do that, and by engaging in more virtue. The act of purifying your merit, again, is the act of giving it away, right? Merit itself is, it doesn't need to be purified in the same way other things do, but our merit is contaminated essentially, since we are contaminated sentient beings. Which just means that our minds that generated that merit have afflictions in them, right? Which is what it means to be contaminated. So the merit itself can't be uncontaminated until we free ourselves from afflictions or until we engage in um, uncontaminated meditative equipoise. But we can purify our merit by, again, not keeping it for ourselves. So the first three activities for merit, in terms of giving away, protecting, and purifying, are all the same thing, which is dedicating. And then to multiply your merit, the strongest way to do that is to rejoice, both in the merit you've accumulated, as well as the merit of all ordinary beings, as well as the merit of all Arya beings, right? So that's how you apply those four activities to merit. And again, you do that in your meditation practice as well as in your daily life, in your regular practices, right? The act of dedication isn't just you meditate on dedicating, you actually do the dedication as well. And in terms of possessions, it's the same thing, right? Um, Giving away your possessions is very clear. Practicing generosity, material generosity. Guarding your possessions is taking care of your possessions, right? Like not letting them go to waste, not letting them, if it's like food and whatnot, letting it spoil, making sure everything you have, whether you're keeping it for yourself or giving it away, it is in good shape, right? You're paying attention to whatever possessions you have, and you're not mindless about them. That's what it means to protect them. It doesn't mean to like hoard them away from thieves. And you're not Smog sitting on his pile of gold. What you're doing is making sure whatever possessions you have, you keep them in good order. Because otherwise, what's the point? If you have all these possessions that you don't even think about and they become in disrepair and they fall apart, then you don't need them. Right? That's showing you that you have things you don't need. So to protect your possessions means to keep them in good order, to take care of them, especially if they're going to be possessions that you later give away to others.
And then to multiply your possessions, again, it is through the act of generosity that we achieve the karmic result in this life and in future lives of wealth, right? So to multiply your possessions, you practice generosity. And to purify your possessions is to make sure that whatever possessions you have, you've accumulated them in a proper way, which is to say you haven't stolen them, and you've made sure that they have not been, even if you didn't steal them, that they weren't stolen and they weren't acquired using any nefarious means, whether on your behalf or your instruction or not your instruction, right? So to make sure your possessions are purified is that you make sure that they're acquired in the proper way and that you aren't clinging to them with a mind of miserliness or attachment, because then they no longer become purified objects. They become objects of attachment, which are not helping you. So these activities of um, generosity or giving away, protecting, multiplying, and purifying are mental activities. And so the reason he brings them up here in this quote is just to show that these activities, when you meditate on these things, you're doing analytical meditation, right? If I'm meditating on what it means to give away my possessions or to give away my body, then I'm doing an analytical meditation. I'm not resting in a non-analytical meditation. And what he's saying from this quote is that that type of meditation can also be included in the final of the three, which is to say meditation itself. So that's the reason this quote comes into being. These four and three aren't necessarily the most important things to be meditating on, but he's just using this as proof to say that in all three, study, contemplation, and meditation, you do have both stabilizing meditation, which is to say non-analytical meditation, and you have analytical meditation. So that's where those activities come in. The idea here that he's talking about between analytical meditation and stabilizing meditation, non-analytical meditation, um, part of the point he's making is that we say like a meditative equipoise on emptiness, which is what you achieve when you achieve one of the paths, right? You have an analytical meditative equipoise on emptiness when you achieve the path of preparation, and then when you achieve a non-analytical meditation or direct perceiver that recognizes emptiness directly, that is when you achieve the path of seeing, right? So in that point, you're meditating on emptiness in a non-analytical way. That's what it means to rest in emptiness in non-analytical meditation. Is that it's a direct perceiver, seeing whatever the object is, in this case emptiness, without any intermediary, seeing it directly, right? So that's a non-analytical meditation. But his point is, in order to achieve that, you need to have analytical meditation first. Because without analytical meditation, if you don't understand the contours of whatever the object is you're meditating on, whether it be emptiness or whether it be perfect human rebirth, then you're not able to develop a non-analytical meditation that rests in it with strength, right? Because the opposites or doubts are going to disrupt your meditation. So he points out that all of the topics that we are going to be discussing, starting with, this is talking about guru devotion, but then from guru devotion all the way until wisdom, there are analytical meditations that you do on these topics. And through those analytical meditations, you develop the capacity to sit then in non-analytical meditation on them. So we're going to be talking about perfect human rebirth today. To do analytical meditation on perfect human rebirth, there are different types you can do. You can look at the 10 and the 8, right? The endowments and the freedoms, and you can analyze them independently, or you can look at your own this rebirth and look at how those 10 and 8 are manifest in your life and your experience. If you're looking at just one of those, right? So the fact that you were born as a human, let's say, then in your meditation, your analytical meditation, what you're doing then is analyzing what are the opportunities that are afforded to me as a human? What are the obstacles that I'm avoiding as a human? Why is it so important to be born as a human? You're doing this work of contemplation, right? But just because you're doing analytical work doesn't mean it's only the meditation that is within the category of contemplation. It can be any of these three. And then once you do that, once you have some confidence in it, then you can sit in non-analytical meditation on that topic, where you use that object, whatever it may be, such as the fact that I was reborn human, which is one of the endowments, right? And you use that as your object, and you don't do any sort of analysis because you've done the analysis already, right? So in that way, you're able to sit and develop a greater realization of that particular object, whatever it may be. So every topic that we discuss, you have to start with analytical meditation. And then when you have some confidence in it, then you can do non-analytical meditation. And the reason he's pointing that out is the instinct is to say, well, then when I first study, and this is how we talk about the three of study, meditation, excuse me, study, contemplation, and meditation. Study is learning something new. So you're getting kind of secondhand information, right? Then contemplation is when you're really analyzing it for yourself. You are getting rid of your doubts. You're developing firsthand understanding of that topic. And then once you've done that, then you sit in meditation on it to make that understanding become deeper and more embedded into your mind. So it's non-separate from your mind. So when we talk about it that way, it very much sounds like the act of meditation of those three means you're no longer analyzing and you're only sitting in the stabilizing meditation that is non-analytical. And often that is the case. He's just pointing out that doesn't have to be the case all the time, right? We'd say there's no pervasion in that regard. So all three of those types of activities can have both analytical components and non-analytical components. And so in order for us to actually achieve non-analytical meditation on emptiness, which is to say a direct realization of emptiness, before that, we have to have a mind and a wisdom that emerges from meditation, which is to say we have to have special insight or vipassana that's focused on emptiness. But that vipassana itself has to come from a calm abiding that is focused on emptiness, right? And that calm abiding is going to come through taming our mind, getting rid of our excitement and our lethargy, and sitting in a stabilizing meditation that allows our mind to develop single pointed concentration. So you see, and then even to get there, whatever topic we're debating on, or excuse me, we're meditating on, we have to first start with analytical meditation on that topic so we can then engage in concentration on that topic without being wavered back and forth. So you see that our practice goes back and forth between analytical meditation, then stabilizing meditation, then more analytical meditation to eventually become a direct realization that is non-analytical and is sitting comfortably resting in a meditation on that topic. So we have to go back and forth. And with
Venerable,
that regard,
can I ask
yeah.
a follow-up question? You said that in all the three pillars can have analytical and non-analytical components. Can you just explain or give an example of the contemplation that is not analytical?
So the difference between a contemplation that's non-analytical and a meditation that's non-analytical, the practice is going to be the same. It has to do with your depth of understanding it, right? So at this point, because we also have to remember that when we talk about these three, the point of these three is the wisdom that emerges from these three, right? And so we say that when you have a wisdom that emerges from contemplation, that generally is going to be a analytical understanding. So when you have your first understanding of emptiness is going to be an understanding that is conceptual, right? And that conceptual understanding of emptiness is going to come as a wisdom that emerges from contemplation for most sentient beings. It could also be a wisdom that emerges from hearing, but that's less common, right? Then when you have that's your first understanding of emptiness. Then when you develop special insight on emptiness, it's going to be emptiness.
Right.
It's going to be a wisdom that emerges from meditation. So it's the wisdom that emerges from these three that is most important. But in order to get there, you have to do the practice. So a non-analytical and non-conceptual meditation that would be, or practice that would be included within the contemplation is as you are developing your own understanding of that topic and you're developing confidence in that topic, engaging in practice on it, you know? And so you can intersperse in one session both both of these types of techniques. So first, you might, for 5 minutes, actually engage in analytical meditation, developing confidence about whatever the topic is. And then for 5 minutes, you just try to sit with that meditative object, with your mind focused on it clearly, without wavering. Once you've developed confidence on it, right? And then you move on to the next object, which you again begin a process of analysis. So conceptual and analytical meditation here. To say non-conceptual and to say non-analytical are very similar, right? So that,
Venerable.
but for us, one moment. Let me follow my train of thought before I lose it. So for us right now, we're trying to accomplish calm abiding. So to accomplish calm abiding, we need stabilizing meditation, which is allowing us to develop the strength of our concentration, right? That's what we do as we practice avoiding the two main faults of lethargy and excitement. And we do that by whatever the object of our meditation is, trying to develop single point of concentration on it, using introspection to alert ourselves when our mind goes astray. So this is a stabilizing type of meditation, right? It is not a non-conceptual meditation, because we haven't achieved non-conceptual realizations of whatever that object is yet, but it is a non-analytical meditation, right? And so that can also happen as this act of analysis or this act of contemplation, as you try to develop a deeper understanding of whatever the topic is. And then lastly, before I get to the question, and that the follow-up question, we also have to remember that both calm abiding as well as special insight are mental factors, right? So calm abiding is a mental factor of concentration, and special insight is a mental factor of wisdom. These are both what are known as the Yungenga, so the types of mental factors that cognize or recognize their object, right? The object of the main mind, whatever the main mind is. So the Yungenga, you have both a wish or an aspiration, that's dumpa. You have belief, you have, which is mipa. You have drenpa, which is mindfulness or memory. And then you have tingizin, concentration. And you have shutup, which is wisdom or intelligence in this regard, right? So these are 5 types of mental factors that help realize the object of whatever that main mind is, right? And so when you develop these mental factors, they aren't the only aspect of that mind. So when you develop special insight, that special insight is necessarily conjoined with calm abiding. So that mind, a special insight, is a mental factor that it's going to have along with it in that, how do you say it in English? That main mind will have, as part of its cluster of mental factors, it will have both special insight, the wisdom of special insight, and it will have the concentration of calm abiding. Whenever you have special insight, it is going to have calm abiding as interjoined with it, because one is a type of concentration, a thing is in, one is a type of wisdom or intelligence, a shed up. And so they're always going to happen at the same time when you achieve a special insight on a specific object. So one aspect of that mind is going to be engaging in this understanding of it through wisdom, this deeper understanding. And then another aspect is going to be focused on it without wavering, a type of concentration that is stable and is unmoving, right? And so those work hand in hand, and they're always going to go together. So it's another thing to remember that they aren't these separate ideas. You don't achieve them simultaneously. You have to achieve calm abiding first, right? Because that's what's giving you the ability to look at an object without wavering and without effort. And you actually achieve calm abiding, then your single point in concentration doesn't take any effort anymore when you achieve it given a certain object, right? It's effortless single point in concentration. And then based on that effortless single point in concentration, which itself can be a non-analytical practice, or is a non-analytical practice, you develop an insight which transforms into the wisdom that emerges from meditation, which is to say, special insight or on that same object. So that is, we're going to talk more about that when we get to those sections. Okay. When we get to the 6 perfections, the fifth perfection is the perfection of concentration, and that will be all about how to develop calm abiding and the importance of it. And the 6th perfection, the perfection of wisdom, is going to be talking about emptiness and selflessness, but it's also going to be talking about developing special insight on emptiness and selflessness. So there'll be more extensive discussion of both of those types of meditation when we get to that, which is the kind of last 2 sections of the text. Here, that is not his main point. His main point is to dispel the idea that analytical meditation and stabilizing meditation or non-analytical meditation are totally anathema to one another, and they aren't both necessary. And he wants to dispel the idea that some practitioners only need to focus on one type. And when they say, now I'm engaging in an act of study or an act of reflection, and I don't need to engage in meditation, and others say the opposite, they're both wrong, because we need to be engaging in study, reflection, and meditation together all the time. And there'll be analytical and non-analytical aspects, or stabilizing and analytical aspects that make up all of those types of all 3 pillars of practice, and then the wisdoms that emerge from them. Okay, so I know there's a follow-up question on that. I don't know. I didn't know who it was. I just heard someone. Is there?
Yeah, Venerable Shagun here.
Yeah.
So, Venerable, I always get confusion, contemplation and meditation, let's say. So I think the advice that you were giving, we can start with analytical meditation on anything, like for example, a precious human rebirth, and then sit on it, and that kind of becomes a non-analytical meditation. Then, no, what is the point of contemplation? Are we doing the contemplation before
So
that?
the distinction between an analytical meditation that is contained within contemplation is going to lead to your actual realization of that topic, right? And an analytical meditation that's contained within meditation is after you've already realized it, but you haven't achieved special insight on it. So you're still developing greater understanding of the topic. You've realized it, but you're developing a deeper understanding of it. And obviously, the important part is going to be at that point, a non-analytical meditation is going to give you a more a deeper experiential realization. However, as you want your non-analytical meditation to grow, you have to have a stronger and stronger foundation. So he says at one point, he says it in like one line or one sentence, that the reason we need the analytical meditation is because without it, the opposing forces of whatever it is that we're trying to meditate on will get in the way, right? So if you're meditating on guru devotion and you don't have a really strong analytical practice that gives you a strong understanding and realization of the importance of depending on a lama, a teacher appropriately, then you will start to have, as you try to engage in non-analytical practice, you'll have doubts about the teacher. You'll have criticisms of the teacher. You'll have these kind of things sneak in and disrupt your analytical meditation. So even in the practice of meditation, you still need to have continued analytical practice to make and allow your non-analytical practice to be stronger and to grow and to deepen, right? But in general terms, like this is the way I think about these three for my everyday practice because I haven't achieved special insight. I haven't achieved calm abiding. I'm working on it, but I'm not there. So for me, that's kind of a more conceptual understanding. For my practice, when I think of these three, I really think of them as engaging in learning new material at a secondhand kind of way. It's brand new material to me. I'm ingesting it. I'm just getting my head around it. And that's going to be the practice of study or hearing and whatever wisdom emerges from that. And then contemplation is really trying to understand it, make it no longer secondary or secondhand information, but firsthand information, getting rid of my doubts, having confidence that it's true, and developing some sort of baby understanding of that topic, whatever it is. And then deepening that understanding so it's no longer intellectual, but is instead experiential. That happens through the practice of meditation. So for me, in my regular practice, that's how I think of those three: is learning new information, becoming confident in my understanding of that information, and then transferring that information from an intellectual understanding to an experiential understanding, or is the goal of those three types of practice, right? And as our practice gets more advanced and deeper, then the results get stronger as well. Okay. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Venerable.
He goes over all these things very quickly in that section, simply because that wasn't the goal of him introducing those ideas in that section. I recognize that they're actually really complicated ideas, and he just kind of glosses over them, and that's what I did last week. So hopefully we have a little more understanding of them now. But like I said, both of those topics will come up again later point in the text. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them, but some of them will come up again later, especially in the fifth and sixth paramitas. Okay.
Venerable,
Yeah,
is
go
one
ahead.
more question allowed about this?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So since for me, my calm abiding meditation is like really, really fledgling. I mean, my obviously I've not achieved too much concentration or any, so what I find that when I study some material, and of course I do calm abiding meditation to the best of my ability, and then I contemplate on that material. But the analytical meditation part becomes harder because my concentration is not that strong. So what works then for me is that to take that new material and just keep trying to see over a period of time how it's fitting into my life. Like, so if it's a precious human rebirth, then I might keep that in my head. And as I grow about my day, I keep trying to notice whenever I can. Of course, not like in a consistent way, but oh wow, yeah, this is what it means. Yeah, yeah, I suppose this is what it means. And so that's yeah, does that help, or is that just, I mean, just something
No,
that I'm doing, which is fine, of course.
no, that's appropriate, but you also have to, I mean, but the thing is, in order to be able to go through your day and carry that like you do, the analytical meditation is what's helping you keep those things in your mind, right? So if you need to remember what are the eight freedoms and the 10 endowments, you have to actually engage in an analytical practice of memorizing them, understanding what they mean. And then when you go through your everyday life and you're not actively meditating, in order to recognize them, you have to have an understanding of them, right? So, I mean, I think that's a wonderful practice. That's what we should be trying to do. We're trying to take whatever this understanding is we have and then search for how it affects our everyday life, because our everyday life is our spiritual life. Our spiritual life doesn't exist only on our meditation cushion. It has to exist all the time, right? And so that, I think what you're doing is a great practice. But as we're beginners, we should recognize that we always have to be in our specific meditation practice working to develop both calm abiding and special insight. So working both on analytical and non-analytical meditation, because as you said, and I'll say for me as well, my ability to meditate, I've been meditating for over 2 decades. It's definitely better now than it was then, but if there's a lot better, it can still get, right? So every day I have to be working on both, even if I'm not great at them, because that's what makes them better. They're not going to get better. My ability to meditate isn't going to get better by wishing it was better, right? So I need to always be doing working on both types of meditation to increase my strength in them. But then, as you said, whatever small glimmer of understanding I get from my meditation, I then bring it into my everyday life and see how it applies. Those are both important practices. So we shouldn't
Oh,
sacrifice one for the other, you know?
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Venerable, I have a question, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
Um, I I understand totally the importance of analytical meditation and calm abiding meditation. But I think it's a totally unfair game we are playing, because as soon as we get out of the gate, the world is reinforce ourselves. They're trying to throw the relativity reality as absolute reality, and we are as they are the teachers that are teaching the opposite side of freedom. And
I
I
mean,
think it's the meditation is very precious, but I think, is there any stronger weapon to we can use against this so delusional
yeah,
world that people are believing in and trying to sell us because they believe, and we are going to suffering more and more every time. And is
yeah.
there any other more strong weapon?
I mean,
Because
you know,
they are hard to keep, but there are more things we can do to be aware
mhm.
of this world.
I mean, the truth is, like, samsara isn't fair, right? Samsara isn't fair. It's going to play dirty. It's going to play sneaky. And ultimately, our mind is our best weapon. Like, our mind is our only weapon. Our mind has the capacity to become a Buddha. Our mind has the capacity to become omniscient, to understand every phenomena, right? So our mind is our best weapon. So engaging in these meditation practices when we're sitting on a cushion and we can like block out the world is a way to train our mind, to strengthen our mind, so that when we get up off our cushion and samsara is throwing every distraction our way, both our regularly occurring distractions and then the distractions that come from living in a society that is based on capitalism and is based on buying things and trying to purchase happiness and avoid unhappiness, a society that celebrates worldly delights. When that is happening, we have to build up the resilience in our meditation practice so that we can face it and then understand how to navigate it. So as we were talking about, last week, there's going to be different techniques that are more beneficial for some people. So just training the mind to be able to concentrate single pointedly on an object, whatever it wants, that's not good enough. We have to then use that. And so, for instance, if we have a tendency to be overwhelmed by attraction to new shiny things that we always want to buy, right? Then we have to be able to first develop our mind so that when we need it when we need it, it's strong enough. And then we can use that mind to look at the fact that our attachment to buying these new things is misplacing a sense of beauty and misunderstanding the nature of reality versus what we perceive, what we project onto reality. So as you had discussed last week, how we can use a little understanding of emptiness to help overcome our attachment, or we can do other practices. So it's going to depend on the person what practice is going to be most useful in their everyday life, right? But they all are going to come down to increasing or unlocking the capacity of our mind, unlocking the capacity of our mind to be aware of what's happening, to be aware when samsara is bombarding us, to be aware when we're giving in to any of our reactionary emotions, right? When our delusions are what are leading the charge, we have to be aware of that. And if we're not aware of it, we're never going to be able to overcome them. So the first weapon is our ability to recognize that I am under the control of my delusions right now, right? And then I have enough control of my mind to recognize that and to stop my action. And then use some sort of antidote to either suppress that negative emotion or to totally undo it. But that all comes from our meditation practice and then bringing that into our everyday life. So they all have the same fuel. The same fuel source is going to be strengthening our mind through dedicated meditation, using both analytical and non-analytical practices. And then as we get out into the everyday life, and we have to face samsara head on, and we have to face our delusions head on in the real world, then we have to see what is the best strategy depending on our individual karma, our individual imprints, our individual personalities and predilections. Is that a little bit helpful?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Awareness, 24 hours awareness will be the first strong weapon we can have. So,
but also just reminding ourselves that we have the weapons. Like our weapon is our mind, and our mind has infinite capacity, right? Our mind can become a Buddha, and it doesn't feel like that all the time. It doesn't feel like that a lot of the time when we feel like we are doing everything wrong and we're doing nothing but mistakes, right? And the world is like crapping on us left and right. It's hard to remember sometimes. We have to remember that we all have the capacity to become Buddhas. Every sentient being has the capacity to become Buddhas, right? And therefore, if we practice, we can realize that. And even if we don't realize it in this life, we can make steps towards it. So reminding ourselves of that is really important because it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget how incredibly powerful our minds are when we actually work on them, right? So I think that's also important to remind ourselves. At least it is
okay,
for me.
Thank you. Thank you a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you a lot.
Okay, so with that, let's continue in the text. So we're on page 38, A Precious Human Rebirth. And now just to kind of put ourselves in context, right? We started by praising the text and the teacher and by understanding what it means to be a student and to understand the Dharma, what the appropriate mental attitude it is to receive the Dharma in a meaningful way. And then we talked about the importance of relying on a teacher, right? And then after the importance of relying on a teacher, we say once we have developed a mind that relies on the teacher in an appropriate way, then what do we do next, right? So you can see on page 38, the outline says the stages of training the mind once you have relied upon a spiritual teacher. And the first one is A Precious Human Rebirth, right? How to actually recognize that we have the opportunity to practice Dharma in a meaningful way. And then the next outline is what to do with that essence. So we realize the essence of our precious human rebirth. That's going to motivate us to practice and not only motivate us, but empower us. It's going to make us realize that we have opportunities that almost no other sentient being does. And by recognizing that, it empowers us to engage in a spiritual practice, right? And then the next topic we won't get to today probably is then going to talk about the distinction between the three scopes of the small scope, the medium scope, and the great scope. So really, the way Tsongkhapa is positing and organizing this here, meditating on a perfect human rebirth, as well as meditating on proper guru devotion or proper reliance on a guru, precede those divisions. Because if you even want to engage in a spiritual practice, you first have to have the right foundation, which is your spiritual teacher. And then you have to have the motivation or the recognition that you need to be engaging in spiritual practice. And that is going to come from meditating on perfect human rebirth. And then once you have the motivation to engage in a spiritual practice, that's when we say, well, there are these three different types of spiritual goals of small scope, medium scope, and great scope, right? So that comes after you actually are motivated to engage in a spiritual practice. So just for me, it's important to remember how critical it is. Sometimes it seems silly to me to meditate on perfect human rebirth. You're like, yeah, I get it. I'm lucky. I get it, right? So it doesn't seem like something we should be doing. Like, for me, it's very easy to forget, but it's so critical. It's literally before you engage in a spiritual path, that is what is motivating you. That is what is pushing you onto the path, right? The next actual topic, after we, in this text, what he's going to do after perfect human rebirth, the next topic will be explaining the three scopes and the distinction between the three scopes and why they're taught in that order. But then when you actually start engaging in the meditative topics, the next one is death and impermanence. So what death and impermanence does is it lights a fire under you, right? But that's not going to work unless you already are convinced that you have the capacity that is uncommon and special, right? If you feel a desperate need to practice Dharma, but you don't have the belief that you have the capacity to do so, that urgency isn't going to matter. So we have to start with a perfect human rebirth. And so that's where we are. So that, for me, it's important to remember where these topics come in Tsongkhapa's explanation, right? Because understanding that creates context for my practice and for my intellectual understanding. So then we say, what are the topics here? We say, with regard to the basis of leisure, which is to say, our bodies, our perfect human rebirth, there's an exhortation to take the essence. So first we have to identify what are the leisures or the freedoms, they're sometimes called, and the endowments, which are sometimes called the richnesses as well, right? So this has 2 points. One is describing the leisures or the freedoms. I'm just going to use the language that's in this book. So when I say leisure, it's sometimes called a freedom, and an endowment is sometimes called a richness, right? So we have to identify what are the leisures, there are 8 of them, and what are the endowments, and there are 10 of those, right? So in the summary, so now we're moving on to page 39. In the summary, it says, through rules, the essence of the many worlds of animals and the 8 unfree states are abandoned. You win constant leisure. So here, rules, the word is trim, which is just a shortened version of trim, which is moral discipline. So through ethical discipline, through morality, that is the main cause that is going to allow you to engage, to be free from the world of animals and free from a rebirth in any of the unfree states, quote unquote, right? So when we talk about the 8 freedoms or the 8 leisures, it is being free from the 8 unfree states, right? So accordingly, the leisures consist in freedom from the 8 unfree states. So of these unfree states, 4 of them are unfree states that we could experience as human beings, and 4 of them are unfree states that we experience not as human beings. Okay. So the first 4, the 4 unfree states of humans are, the first one, living in a rough borderland where the 4 types of followers of the Buddha do not roam. So the way we explain this now is not just living in a borderland, but specifically living in a place where we don't have the capacity or the ability to practice a spiritual path of our choosing, right? So living in a place where we don't have the opportunity to engage in our freedom of spiritual practice. Specifically, Buddhist spiritual practice is what we're talking about, but really it's living in a place where you don't have that freedom to engage in spiritual practice as you like. So here it's called a borderland as opposed to a central location, right? So the borderlands are the barbarian lands where, there's no one really in charge. Number 2, being stupid, being dumb, or having incomplete faculties, such as missing a limb, an ear, and so forth. So here, these words stupid and dumb, the word dumb is kukpa, which means mute. So when it says dumb here, it means mute. It doesn't mean dumb in a mental sense. However, stupid is lenpa, and lenpa tends to mean foolish. I've seen some teachers say that this means deaf, but the word doesn't have any relationship to being deaf. It means foolish, it means silly, it means inappropriate. So stupid, I suppose, childish in your behavior. And so here, incomplete faculties, what it's really saying is having incomplete mental or physical faculties. The physical faculties can be missing a limb and so forth, or incomplete faculties such as an inability to hear, see, smell, taste, or touch completely, right? And the reason this is an unfree state is because it limits our capacity to practice. So, this goes for all 18 of these. Well, really, the 4 states of being non-human are different, but not counting those, even if we don't have all 18, it doesn't mean that we can't practice Dharma, but it means we have more obstacles to practicing Dharma, right? So when we have all of these conditions, that is the best accumulation of all of the best conditions. That is the prime capacity. So if we're missing one, that doesn't mean we can't practice Dharma. It doesn't mean we can't have realization in this life, right? So someone that is mute, it doesn't mean that they can't have realizations. But if you're mute, it means you aren't able to engage in the virtue of speech in the same way. So that makes it more difficult for you, right? You have a greater number of obstacles. And so that is what is happening with all of these, right? There isn't like a black and white line that says if you have this, you can't achieve realization, you're worthless. That's not the point. That's not what it means. The point is having all 18 of these means we have the greatest capacity and the fewest number of obstacles to practice Dharma. So that's an important thing to realize. That saying if you have incomplete faculties or any of these things, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't practice. It means you have more obstacles, right? So living in a borderland, having incomplete faculties. Number 3, holding wrong views that regard the past and future lives, actions and their effects, which is to say karma and the results of karma, and the 3 jewels as non-existent. So in terms of wrong views, these are the heaviest wrong views we can have, right? Not believing that karma and its results are true, not believing that past and future lives really are true, and not accepting the 3 jewels as authentic sources of refuge. Or not believing in those is considered a heavy wrong view, right? And then the last of the 4 unfree states of humans are being without the word of a victor, which is to say a Buddha, with no Buddha having appeared in the world. So if we're at a time and a place where the teachings of the Buddha don't exist, then obviously it's much more difficult to practice them. So we are free of that, right? So these are unfree states that we don't have. We have the freedom of being, or the leisure of being free from these unfree states. The next 4 are very simple. The 3 lower realms, so being born as an animal, being born as a hungry ghost, being born as a hell being, or being born as a long life god. So those are the 4 unfree states that don't have to do with humans, the non-human unfree states. And the human unfree states have to do with the conditions that we experience, both our physical and mental conditions, as well as our environmental conditions. And obviously, some of those are changeable. So having wrong views is an unfree state. And we may have grown up in a culture where we held these wrong views, but we're able to overcome those, right? So this isn't set in stone. Not all of them, at least. Especially that one. We can overcome that wrong view.
Venerable, there are a question. There are many religious practice or whatever religions that obviously don't posit a past and like karma. I guess he's talking about the law of karma, and I think like today there are more people who probably don't recognize karma than there are that those, which means to say that all of them are doomed. That's rather
No, but that's what I was saying, Madhvi, is that to say that you don't have that condition doesn't mean you're doomed, but it means you have a greater obstacle to actually achieving more and more realization, right? So, I have good friends who are Christian priests and reverends and who have incredible hearts, who have incredible compassion. We say that if you don't believe in past and future lives, and you don't believe in karma and its results, and you don't accept the 3 jewels as authentic sources of refuge, you're going to be limited in the number of realizations you can achieve, right? Because you don't have all of the tools that are necessary. However, you can still definitely purify your mind. You can overcome great many obstacles. You can do incredible work to benefit others and to improve your condition and to be of great service to the world and to progress towards Buddhahood. However, if you have those wrong views, which is to say those don't exist, then you're only going to be able to go so far. There's going to be a boundary, right? A limit. So it doesn't mean you're doomed, but it means in this particular life, as long as you have those wrong views, there's going to be a limit to how far you can go, right? Part of being Buddhist, though, is recognizing that we're probably, most of us are not going to become Buddhists in this life, whether we have those wrong views or not, right? So our goal is to do the best we can with whatever resources we have, recognizing that Buddhahood may be many, many, many lives off. And so as long as we're moving in the right direction, then we're working in a beneficial way. And so people that are part of other faith traditions, if they're doing their best to be a good person with whatever belief they have in their faith tradition, then we can say that they are taming their mind, they are cultivating a good heart in such a way that they're moving closer to Buddhahood, but they're not going to be moving necessarily at the same speed as someone who's practicing the Buddha Dharma might be, because they have different obstacles. And they have that the wrong view is such an obstacle. It doesn't mean they're doomed, right?
Right, but you personally don't think that this is a very hard line kind of a view, because there are traditions that say if you don't believe in our God, then I mean, you might be a very nice person, but poor you. And it seems to me that here uh, the Buddhist texts are also saying the same thing, that, if you don't believe in our view, you might be a very nice person, but poor you. It's not similar, is it? Or
The difference is that since we posit it is similar. Whereas you can't achieve Buddhahood in this life if you do not, if you hold these wrong views, right? If you don't meditate on emptiness, then you're not going to achieve Buddhahood in this life, right? That we say very clearly. However, the difference is that we believe that most of us aren't going to achieve Buddhahood in this life. What we're going to do is move closer to Buddhahood. And to move closer to Buddhahood, it doesn't mean practicing only Buddha Dharma, right? If you're doing the work in a meaningful way to improve your mind and to be a good person, then you're moving closer. So you won't Buddhism is clear that if you have these wrong views or this type of wrong view, then that is an obstacle to achieving Buddhahood in this life. However, that doesn't mean you'll never become a Buddha. All sentient beings will eventually become Buddhas. We all have that same capacity. So you're still moving and you can still be moving in the right direction. However, it does. So that's the difference, right? With other faith traditions, especially outside of India, faith traditions that don't believe in multiple rebirths, that only believe that this is your one chance, they say very clearly, if you don't achieve it in this life, then that's it, you're done for, right? I actually, one of my first times returning to America from here in India, I was flying through maybe Abu Dhabi or somewhere. I don't remember. I was flying through, um, I had some layover. And at the layover at the airport, I was waiting for my next plane. And there was an American family and they were also flying to America on the same flight as me. And it was a father, a husband and wife, and two children. And the husband came over to me and he was asking all these questions about Buddhism. He was incredibly friendly, and I was just sucked in. Like I was answering him, I was being polite, giving him all these things. And we asked about this question of very similar to what you're saying, like the importance of practicing Buddhism and achieving Buddhahood in this life or future lives and these things. And at some point he interrupted me. He goes, "Well, unfortunately, future lives don't exist. And so if you don't believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you're going to burn in hell forever. And so as a compassionate person, my goal is to save you from that." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So it turns out he was a missionary, and I didn't realize that. He sucked me in, and he got me talking. But so his position was very clear. Like, you have this one chance, and if you don't do it now, then there's no hope for you. There's never going to be any hope for you. And you have to believe what I say is correct, or what my tradition says is correct, because we understand the reality. And if you don't believe it, then I'm sorry, but you're doomed. That's not what we say. We say if you don't believe it, you won't achieve Buddhahood in this life, but that doesn't mean you're doomed. It means you can move towards Buddhahood, right? So there's a big
oh,
difference between those two
thank you,
positions,
thank you. I see that now. There is a big difference. Yeah, thank you.
right? I don't know enough about um, Jainist or various Hindu and Vedic ideas of soteriology to understand and make a comment on how they view future lives and moving towards moksha in future lives. So I can't speak to the relationship to that in Indian religious traditions, but I can to most other traditions that focus on this one life only. You have one chance only, which is very, very different than what we say. But it is true though. It does sometimes feel a little bit what was it? When I was in grad school, I made some comment. I had a class with an American Buddhist teacher. He was an American Zen teacher, and he basically founded his own form of Zen. Like he made up his own form of Zen. He came from a tradition of Mazumi Roshi, who he learned with, but then he Americanized it in his own way. And he accepts anyone as a Zen priest, which is to say, they're Christian priests who then he makes them Zen priests. And I asked him, like, the Buddha had very clear thoughts about these things, and he called me a supremacist. He said I'm a Buddhist supremacist, and I was like, I don't know what to tell you. Like the Buddha was very clear about some things. There are other things he was less clear on, but some things he was clear on. So there is that flavor of being a supremacist, saying you have to believe what we believe in order to achieve Buddhahood. So that's there. But the truth of it is, since most of us aren't going to achieve Buddhahood in this life, then the goal is always to be moving closer to Buddhahood. And everyone can do that, regardless of your faith tradition or your lack of faith tradition. Everyone can move closer to Buddhahood in this life if they work on their mind in a meaningful way, right? His Holiness Dalai Lama says it all the time. For most people, whatever religious or spiritual tradition that you grew up in as part of your culture, that practicing that is going to help you move towards Buddhahood, or it's going to make you a better person, is the way he puts it. It's going to allow you to achieve a good mind more immediately, right? For most people, because you already have the predilection of understanding that system. So by saying that, what he's saying is you're moving closer to Buddhahood. And it's not going to happen in this life, but by practicing that, you're still moving in the right direction, or it's possible to be. Right.
Venerable,
Okay.
do you think it would be possible in this lifetime to conquer absolutely, completely anger, attachment, aversion, and proud and envy, and
definitely
in one life, totally, completely?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so first off, when we practice Tantra, we can say we can achieve Buddhahood in one lifetime, right? Practicing Tantra. But even outside of practicing Tantra, we say to achieve calm abiding meditation, to achieve calm abiding, if you're doing an ordinary person, Pabonka Rinpoche says in his text, Liberation in the Palm of Your Hands, someone who has no experience meditating, if they go into a mountainside and do a dedicated meditation retreat for 6 months, they can achieve calm abiding. So you can go from nothing to calm abiding in 6 months. Now, most of us we can't do 24-hour retreat, like isolated retreat for 6 months. We don't have that luxury, but that's just showing how accessible it is to achieve calm abiding in this very life. If we put effort into it, it's very, very achievable. And once you achieve calm abiding, that is going to give you a much stronger foundation to then help overcome all of your delusions. So you won't be able to eliminate the delusions until you actually achieve direct insight into the nature of reality, which will take a long time or more time, but you will be able to eliminate your manifest delusions, right? So they'll still be within your mental continuum, but you won't be acting on them, right? So that's definitely possible in this life, 100%, you know? And I don't know, I can't speak for any of you, but I can speak for myself, having practiced for as long as I have. I haven't achieved any realizations, yet I do know that my life is much more peaceful. I have much less anger. I have much less attachment than I did 20 years ago. Never mind 20 years ago. Within my first few years of practicing, it was noticeable how much I was able to overcome attachment and anger specifically in my life, right? And jealousy and these kind of minds, which isn't to say I conquered them, but just they're so prevalent in our everyday, ordinary beings' minds that to even turn them down a little bit is a huge improvement, right? And so anyone that has been practicing for any length of time, if you look back, don't look at where you were yesterday. Don't look at where you were a week ago. Look at where you were 6 months ago. Look at where you were a year ago. And that's when you'll see that there's been growth and there has been progress, right? I guarantee there has been. Maybe not as much as we want. It'd be great if it could be faster, but you'll definitely see progress. If you try to measure it day by day by day, then it's hard to see, right? But I promise that in this one life, even without practicing Tantra, we can overcome our grossest delusions. Maybe not totally eliminate them, but definitely overcome them so they don't run our lives. That's definitely possible, Okay. He goes on to give a little bit explanation of what he means by a long life God. So he says the former, as for the long life gods, the commentary on the friendly letter discusses two types. So the friendly letter is also known as Letter to a Friend by Nagarjuna. The commentary, I believe, is the auto commentary, also by Nagarjuna, but I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. But he says that they discusses two types of long life gods: those who are discriminationless and those who are formless. So the former live in one region on the fourth concentration, which is called Great Result, as if in solitary place far away from a village. The latter are ordinary beings born in the formless realms. In the discourse on the 8 unfree states, the gods of the desire realm, who are constantly distracted by activities of desire, are explained also to be long life gods. So all this is just saying, what does he mean by long life gods? So in general, the most common type of long life god that you're explained is, so we say there's 3 realms of sentient beings. There is the desire realm, which includes all 6 types of rebirth. And then there is the form realm, which contains form realm gods. And there is the formless realm, which contains formless realm gods, right? So there's these 3 realms of sentient beings. And there are types of god rebirth in all 3. So usually we say that long life gods are a type of formless realm God. But there's also, when you engage in meditative absorption, we talk about the 4 meditative absorptions that are related to the form realm, and then the 4 that are related to the formless realm, right? So there are 8 meditative absorptions. The 4th one, which is the highest meditative absorption related to the form realm, and that's called Great Result. That's the name of that realm. That also, beings that reside in that realm are long life gods as well. And then it is possible, he says here, that there are gods that exist in the desire realm that are also long life gods. To be honest, this is not incredibly important for us, except to show that long life gods is more than one category of long life gods, and none of them are free. None of them have the luxury of practicing Dharma in the way that we do, right? That's the most important part, that there are different levels of God birth, of God rebirth. And the specific problem with long life gods, whichever one of those types you are, is that to be reborn as a long life God takes a lot of merit, right? Because in general, those lives are filled with worldly bliss in many ways. And so you're exhausting a lot of merit to be reborn there. But you're not accumulating more merit because you're not engaging in spiritual practice, because your life is so easy that you don't have any motivation to practice. This is true for most gods, but especially true for long life gods. So you're not experiencing a lot of coarse suffering. You're only experiencing subtle suffering, and therefore you don't practice. So you don't accumulate more merit, right? And then generally, the long life gods, at least those that are in the 4th concentration, those long life gods, at the end of their lives, part of their mental capacity is that they're able to see where their next rebirth is going to be. And because they've exhausted so much positive karma to live as a long life god with all of the pleasures that they have, then they're almost always their next rebirth is in a lower realm. And they can see that before they die. And so that causes incredible mental anguish for them, right? So again, an inability to practice Dharma and an exhaustion of all or so much good karma that would be useful in practicing Dharma to create positive conditions. So that's why being free of that is incredibly beneficial, right? But the specifics of those maybe don't really matter as much as what matters is realizing that that is a condition that is unideal for practice. In the same as being born as one of the lower realms, being born as an animal or a hungry ghost or a hell being, the suffering of those realms is so great that you don't have the capacity to practice Dharma. With animals in general, we say that their ignorance and their dullness is so heavy that they don't have the mental capacity to engage in spiritual practice, right? And their suffering of dullness or stupidity is so strong that there's no capacity to practice. For hungry ghosts, beings born there, their suffering of attachment is so overwhelming that they have no capacity to practice. And the suffering of pain and the suffering of anger in the hell beings' lives is so overwhelming that there's never a moment that they can dedicate to spiritual practice, right? So we might have, or we do have, experiences of dullness and attachment and anger, but they don't compare at all to the experiences in those lower realms. So being free of those means we have this great opportunity. Let's continue through the endowments, and then we can talk some more about it. So the endowments also is split into 2, right? There are 10 endowments. The first 5 are what are called the personal endowments, and then the latter 5 are what are called the endowments that are conditioned by others. So the first 5, so he says this has 2 points. The first 5 personal endowments. The 5 personal endowments are said to be human birth in the center, unimpaired senses, no perverted deeds, and faith in the basis. And so then he explains that. So the first one, he doesn't explain. Human birth. That's the first one, right? So the first of the 5 personal endowments is being born as a human. And then in the center means not to be born in a place where the 4 types of followers roam. To be born in a place where the 4 types of followers roam. So the 4 types of followers are the different types of Buddhist practitioners, right? Unimpaired senses consist of not being stupid, but again, here it means dull or foolish, or dumb, here it means mute, and having complete limbs, including all the minor body parts, the eyes, the ears, and so forth. Having no perverted deeds implies not having committed or caused to commit any action of immediate retribution. So there are 5 actions of immediate retribution. right? And these are incredibly heavy negative karma. They say if you commit one of these actions completely, the karma is so heavy that when you pass away from this life, you're immediately reborn in a hell realm. You don't even stop in the bardo. Like your mind is immediately reborn into a hell realm being because they're so heavy. So the 5 actions of immediate retribution are killing your mother, killing your father, killing an arhat, drawing blood from a Buddha with malice, or causing a schism in the Sangha community, right? And so drawing blood from a Buddha with malice is just saying not accidentally cutting a Buddha. I don't know how you do that, but not accidentally doing that, but intentionally trying to harm a Buddha and drawing blood from them, right? So those actions are so heavy that if you you have a complete karma of one of those 5, it's called a action of immediate retribution. And so being free from those is this endowment, not having any perverted deeds, which is to say, not be carrying the karma of immediate retribution. And then the last one, faith in the basis. That means faith in the foundation from which all mundane and supermundane wholesome qualities arise, which is discipline. So having faith in discipline is this last one. And then here he says discipline should be applied to all 3 scriptural collections. So what he means by that is having faith in the teachings of the Buddha, which are contained in the 3 scriptural collections to lead you to freedom from suffering. So the 3 scriptural collections are called discipline, right? And the reason they're called discipline is because they tame the mind, and they tame your actions of body, speech, and mind. So the word discipline here is actually referencing all the teachings of the Buddha that are contained in the 3 scriptural collections, right? And having faith in them, having faith in discipline means to have faith in all the teachings of the Buddha to free you from suffering and to tame your body, speech, and mind to allow you to achieve freedom from samsara for yourself and others. So that's the last one. Having faith, basically, the short version is to say having faith that the teachings of the Buddha are going to lead you out of suffering, right? That's what that means. But here it's described as having faith in the basis. And it's called the basis because the discipline, right? Here, the term in Tibetan here is dua, which is the same word we use for Vinaya. It means to tame something, right? Or to control something. And so having faith in that taming means what is it that is tamed? Our minds are tamed. And how are they tamed? They're tamed by the teachings of the Buddha, right? So that's why that is used. And that's what that means. Now, it's worth noticing that before we get to the next 5 endowments, of the 8 freedoms, almost all of them are duplicated here in these first 5 endowments, right? And that the reason for that is it's giving us when we meditate on it, we meditate on it from 2 directions of what we have and what we're free from. So meditating on the same idea from 2 different ways gives us a stronger understanding of it. So the first endowment, being born human, that is equivalent to all 4 of the non-human leisures, being free from the 4 non-human states, right? So being free from being born as an animal, hungry ghost, hell being, or long life god, and being born as a human, those are the same thing, essentially, right? The second endowment, being born in the center, is the same as the first leisure, being free from being born on a borderland, right? The third endowment, being born with unimpaired senses, is the same as the second of the freedoms, which is not being born with impaired senses, right? So again, those 2 match up. The 6th and 7th endowment we're going to get to, those are the next ones. Those are equivalent to the 4th freedom. So we'll get to those in a moment, right? The only freedom that isn't covered by the endowments is the 3rd one, being free from holding wrong views. That is not covered by any of the endowments. It's similar to not having engaged in a perverted deed, which is to say not having engaged in an action of immediate retribution, but they're not the same thing. They're similar, but they're not the same thing. So of the 8 freedoms, one of them is uncommon, and that is the 3rd freedom that is related to the unfree state of a human being. And the other ones are common with the endowments, right? And again, the utility of recognizing that is that when we meditate, we don't skip the ones that are common, but it just shows us that they're so important, it's useful to look at them from both directions, the direction of what we have and the direction of what we don't have, because that gives us a firmer understanding of that particular topic, right? So let's continue with the other endowments, and then if there are any questions about the 8 and the 10, we can have them then. So next, the 5 endowments that are conditioned by others. So the first 5 endowments are personal endowments. The next 5 are the 5 endowments that are conditioned by others. And the quote he has here is, "The Buddha arrived and taught the holy Dharma. The teachings are abiding and being followed, and there are hearts with loving concern for others." So here, then, in his commentary on that, he says, the first one, here, a Buddha arrived or emerged. That's the first one. That means after having accumulated the collections throughout 3 countless eons, a Buddha has manifestly attained complete Buddhahood. So that's the first one. Having a Buddha alive teaching at the same time as us. Number 2, a Buddha having taught the holy Dharma means that the Buddha or his hearers have taught the Dharma. That's pretty clear. So those 2, which are the 6th and the 7th endowments, like I said, those are the equivalent of the 4th freedom. The 4th freedom is being in an unfree state that does not have the word of a victor, and having no victor having appeared in that world. So those 2 both are the same as that when they're taken together. Okay. Then the next one, number 8, the Dharma teachings are abiding, means that from teaching the Dharma in a Buddha field up to not passing away into nirvana, the Dharma that is accomplished by means of actualizing the ultimate Dharma has not degenerated. So not only has a Buddha emerged in this world and he's taught Dharma, but those Dharma teachings have spread and have continued. They haven't degenerated. We still have access to them. Then the 9th one says the Dharma teachings are abiding and being followed, means that through that very realization of the Dharma, there are those who see that beings have the power to directly perceive the holy Dharma and who then follow the teachings in accordance with that realization. So a Buddha appeared, a Buddha taught, those teachings spread, and there are beings who follow those teachings, right? And achieve realization based on those teachings. And then lastly, hearts with loving concern for others means that there are almsgivers and benefactors who grant monastic robes and the like, which is to say that in dependence on hearing those teachings, there are beings who support the Dharma, who promote the Dharma. So here it's saying they support the Dharma by making offerings to monastics, but also you could say that they support the Dharma by teaching it, by sharing it, by doing these other activities, right? Of promoting the Dharma, by upholding the Dharma. So these are the 5 endowments that are conditioned by others, that a Buddha appeared, that Buddha taught, the teachings spread, the teachings have followers, and there are people that are supporting those teachings, whether it means through making offerings to monastics or by giving teachings themselves out of their great compassion. So as these 5 are present in the mental continuum of others, and they constitute circumstances for our accomplishment of the Dharma, they are endowed with conditions by others. That's why they're called that. The 5 endowments that are conditioned by others, because those don't exist in our mental continuum, right? They exist in the continuum of others. Now, it's worth saying that in the Lamrim Chenmo, in the great treatise for the stages to the path to enlightenment, Tsongkhapa points out that of these 5, the first 4 we don't have, we technically don't have, right? We have approximations of number 2, 3, and 4, and therefore we can consider them complete. But the first one really means being alive at a time when a Buddha has arrived and is teaching, not in the past tense. So to be very specific and technical, we don't have all 18 leisures and endowments. We only have 17, right? Because at least according to the Lamrim Chenmo, this first one, we don't have a complete realization of. And then numbers 7, 8, and 9 of the endowments, we don't have the technical completion of them, but we have an approximation of them, which still makes them complete or complete enough. He says they're the equivalent of being complete, right? But even though there isn't an active Buddha teaching right now, the teachings of the Buddha still exist, and they still exist in an authentic way, and they have spread in an authentic way. And there are devotees and meditators and teachers who have followed those teachings and are still actively achieving realizations based on those teachings, even though those teachings have occurred after the Buddha has already shown the aspect of passing away. So according to Lamrim Chenmo, he points out that we don't actually have all 18. We have 17, and we're in the right direction of the 18th, but we don't have it in a complete way. Okay, so I think we're going to move on, unless there are any questions about those. 8 and 10.
Yes, I have a good.
Oh,
Yeah.
Divya, maybe I heard you first.
Yes, thank you. So in the previous page, you had mentioned that the holding wrong views is an exception because there is no equivalent endowment. But to me, it seems like the faith in the basis is sort of similar because faith in the basis you mentioned is discipline, which is Buddha's teachings, and Buddha's teaching says that there are
No, that's a
future
good
and
point.
past births and those kind of things.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. If you could make that argument. It would probably hold up in the debate courtyard if you had enough logic behind it. Here, so that's a good point. The important thing is recognizing the heaviness of those wrong views specifically, like how heavy they are and what big obstacles they are to making spiritual progress. However, you're right that if you have actual faith in the teachings of the Buddha and all three scriptural collections, inherent in having faith in those collections and following them with devotion would be you also don't hold these wrong views. So that's a good point, Divya. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you.
Yeah. Again, though, I will say it's useful to look at how the endowments and the ledgers, the ledgers and the endowments overlap, but that doesn't mean we should only meditate on one and not the other, right? I'm pointing that out for our understanding, for our intellectual understanding. But when we engage in practice, you should still meditate on the 8 freedoms, because being free from these things and realizing you're being free from these things is really powerful. And then realizing what you've accomplished and what you're endowed with is also really powerful. So in our practice, we should be practicing meditating on both the freedoms and the endowments, even if they're overlapping, even if they're pointing to the same thing. So I did highlight those things, and I thank you, Divya, for pointing out that one as well. But it's important that that's an intellectual understanding, right? Because we want to have a broader intellectual understanding of the Dharma. But in our meditation practice, we shouldn't skimp, right? We shouldn't cut off one for the other. We should do both. So I don't want to give the impression that it's okay to not meditate on the freedoms as long as you meditate on the endowments because of the overlapping nature. That's not what we want to do. We want to meditate on all 18 so we can become convinced from them of all 18. But intellectually, it's useful to recognize that they are talking about the same things, but coming at it from different angles.
Right. I just wanted to make sure I didn't get it wrong.
No.
So thank you for explaining.
That's just me adding in a little supplement to make sure that people don't get the impression that I'm suggesting we can skip half of this. I just want to clarify a little bit. Okay. Was there another question, I think?
Yes, Venerable. You said that the major retribution where there is where you mentioned one of them was creating a schism in a Buddhist sangha.
Yeah.
What does that mean? How does one do that? I mean,
I mean,
what
for most,
constitutes a schism in a Buddhist sangha?
yeah. So for most of us, it would be very difficult to do at this point at the development of the teachings of the Buddha to complete this fully. If you look at the early time of the Buddha, when there was, after the Buddha showed the aspect of passing away, for instance, and you had the division from the different schools and the different lineages, that would be those schisms came because people said, oh, you don't understand correctly, or you're not teaching correctly, you're not understanding correctly. And they created divisions in the Buddhist community in that way of monks and nuns, right? So in the Vinaya community of ordained monastics, they created these divisions, and even now we have different Vinaya traditions. So the vows I hold are from the Mulasavasthavardhan tradition, which is not the same vows. That is not the same tradition, rather. It's the same vows, but it's not the same tradition as the vows held by East Asian monastics or the same tradition of vows held by Theravadan monastics, right? The vows are the same, but the tradition of those vows and the interpretation of some of them and the commentaries on them are different. And so those divisions came about at the time of the early Sangha. So for us, to actually cause a schism in the Sangha would mean to cause a substantial break in a Dharma community. To say that this Dharma community is not, these members of this community are not practicing in the right way, and therefore to break a community into two. So we probably can't do that in a monastic community, but we can definitely cause dissent and dissension in our own small Dharma communities, right? Which probably would not probably it wouldn't be an action of immediate retribution, but it would be similar to one, right? So basically, we need harmony in Dharma communities, especially in monastic communities, but in all of our Dharma communities, harmony is really important. So any activity we do that could cause disharmony is going to have heavy negative consequences. Because we think of, again, our actions, our non-virtuous actions, one of the ways they become heavy is due to the object of those actions. So a Dharma community, whether it's monastic or not monastic, is a group of people specifically dedicated to coming together to study and practice the Dharma. And so if you cause some sort of dissension and some sort of splitting apart of that community, that's one of the heaviest objects you can create negative karma towards. Or positive karma, to be fair, right? Because the object itself is heavy. And so for us to actually accomplish that action of immediate retribution would be quite difficult, given that we don't live in that type of monastic community anymore. But we could do something similar to it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons, for instance, when Atisha came to Tibet, the Vinaya lineage he held wasn't the same one that was existing in Tibet. And so they asked him not to give vows. So he never gave ordination vows. His whole time in Tibet, the 13 years or however long that Atisha was in Tibet, he never gave ordination vows because his ordination lineage was not the same as the one that had already moved to Tibet. It was separate, right? And so because of that, he gave teachings and he taught all different topics, but he never gave ordination vows. And he was requested not to. And he also didn't want to because by having two different monastic ordination lineages existing in one community is incredibly difficult. And it's a cause for a split of the community, which is part of the reason that there is some, especially senior monks, have trepidation about nuns who go outside of our monastic tradition to receive full ordination vows because they have to receive it in the Dharmagupta tradition, which is not the same tradition of the vows that the monks hold, right? And so any nun who has bhikshuni vows or gelongma vows, they have vows that come from a different Vinaya tradition than the vows that all the monks have. And there's belief that that is going to cause division. And so that is something that many practitioners are wary of. Not that they hold those vows, but that they, by incorporating two different Vinaya traditions into one space, creates a schism. So, for instance, anyone that has those vows, so if any East Asian monks or South Asian monks come to Sarah, for instance, they can't attend our twice a month. We have to attend a ceremony that is the purification and the renewal of our vows. It's called sojong, right? They can't attend it because they don't follow the same lineage of vows as us. So they aren't allowed to attend. Only monks or nuns that hold Mula Savasthavardhan vows are able to attend, right? So you having more than one lineage of vows in one community can create division, or there's a concern for that. However, for most of us, that's not something that we can actively participate in right now. However, it is a reminder that we should always be working towards maintaining harmony within our own Dharma communities, whether they're monastic or not, whether they're very small and they're just our household, or whether they are CKSL, or whether they are the FPMT, or whatever they may be. Trying to maintain harmony is really important, right, in your Dharma community. That doesn't mean if people are acting inappropriately, that doesn't mean to not act out, not to say something against that, right? We need to be appropriate and act in an appropriate way, but we have to make sure that harmony is most important. And if there are things that need to be addressed due to people's behavior or whatever it may be, then we do that in an appropriate manner and we go through the right channels, right? So it's not to sweep misdeeds under the rug in the sake of quote unquote unity, but it's that harmony is most important. So the way you go about navigating difficult situations is to be skillful in the way we navigate them. Okay. So then, if there are no other questions on that, we can continue. Oh, wow. Okay. Didn't realize what time it was. Okay. Well, we won't be finishing this section today, but that's okay. So then continuing in the text, just knowing about the leisures and endowments isn't that useful, right? We have to then consider the great value of having the leisures and the endowments. And that is the next point. So this has 4 points. The first one is, if no practice of the completely pure Dharma for the sake of lasting happiness comes about at all, you would be like an animal despite your birth in a higher realm, since animals also endeavor merely to attain happiness and eliminate suffering until they die. So this is just pointing out that if you have either all 18 of these or a majority of them, but you don't use them, then your life is the equivalent of the life of an animal, right? An animal who doesn't have the same opportunities, but then at least they're not wasting their opportunities, right? If you have the opportunities and you're wasting them, to some extent, that's even worse, right? So this is what's saying is that the inappropriateness of someone who has this special base, which is to say, a perfect human rebirth, but they're not using it. That their life is functioning like the life of an animal. So that's the first thing, just to remind us of that, right? The weight of not using this perfect human rebirth to the best of our ability. And then, so that's like the negative side. Then the positive side says, for the accomplishment of the Mahayana path, a basis like this one, or a basis like the one that has been explained, is necessary. In a letter to a student, it says, the base of the path of those gone to bliss, the tool for leading beings, that very strength of mind, a strength that human beings have gained, that path has not been found by gods or by nagas, nor by asuras, nor by garudas, by vidyadharas, kinnaras, or mahoragas. Right? So the basis for those gone to bliss, which is to say the basis for achieving Buddhahood, that basis is the tool for leading beings. That has only been achieved by us, by human beings, or by people that have a perfect human rebirth or an approximation of it, right? The strength of mind means that the capacity to engage in a spiritual path to full extent. So gods, nagas, asuras, all these other types of beings that he points out, they have achieved different, virtuous or beneficial experience or births, but they still don't have the capacity to practice Dharma in a meaningful way. He goes on to explain that. Furthermore, some gods of the desire realm with strong imprints or predispositions from having previously trained in the path on a human basis are suitable as a basis for seeing the truth for the first time, but it is impossible to attain the Arya path for the first time on an upper realm basis. What this is pointing at is that in order to achieve a direct realization of emptiness, that first moment of achieving a direct realization of emptiness, we say it has to come with a human body. Now, he here is saying in the first line that maybe you can have that first moment if you've done an extensive amount of practice with a human body, but then are reborn as a desire realm god. Maybe it's possible that due to your imprints, you can achieve a realization of emptiness with a desire realm god basis. That is maybe possible, but it's definitely not possible for your first moment of the realization of emptiness or the direct and non-conceptual realization of emptiness to come in the form of a form realm god or a formless realm god. We actually say you have to be a human to achieve it. Here he's saying that maybe desire realm gods can also achieve that first moment, right? And that's just the first moment. After you've achieved that moment, which is to say the path of seeing, right, and become an Arya being, then in the future birth, you could be born as an upper realm god or a different god, and have a realization of emptiness. But the first direct non-conceptual realization of emptiness, which is the transition from the path of preparation to the path of seeing, basically we say it has to happen on a human body, with a human body. Here he's saying there's maybe one exception for desire realm gods that have really strong imprints. But that is one of the reasons that having this body is so important. Never mind having the predisposition and the capacity to practice Dharma in a meaningful way. Even if you are one of these other gods who is trying to practice Dharma due to your very basis, right? The physical body you have and all of the predispositions and the accoutrement that come with that body, the type of mind that is associated with that body, you won't have the ability to realize emptiness directly, right? However, as explained before, the majority of desire realm gods are said to be in an unfree state, and therefore they are not the best basis for attaining the path for the first time. So here he's just saying, it is possible for desire realm god to newly achieve direct realization into the nature of emptiness. It is impossible for a form realm or a formless realm god. It is to achieve it. It is possible for a desire realm, but just barely. Just barely. For the most part, you have to be human. And even a desire realm god that would achieve their first moment of direct realization into emptiness, that's only going to be because they have really strong imprints of having meditated as a human being on the nature of emptiness. And those imprints will be strong enough that then they could achieve it for they'd have a realization a conceptual realization as a human, meditate on it incredibly, achieve the path of preparation as a human, pass away, be reborn as a desire realm God with really strong imprints, then it's possible, he's saying. But it's very rare, very, very rare, right? And even that would require the
Venerable,
human rebirth preceding it. Yeah.
venerable. Isn't
Hmm.
it like a contradiction? We would expect beings of form realm and formless realm to be upper beings, right? Like the higher beings. So it's like they cannot do it. The gods of those realms cannot do it. But yeah, maybe the desire and ones can do it.
Well, but there's two aspects, right? So just practicing Dharma in general, they have the capacity to practice Dharma, but they don't have the inclination to, as form and formless realm gods, because they don't have an experience of suffering to such an extent that would inspire them to practice Dharma. So in terms of just practicing Dharma, they have the capacity to practice Dharma and to engage in a spiritual life, but they don't not they choose not to, but they don't realize they have that capacity. They have no reason to practice. So that's the first thing. Um, the next thing is the actual first realization of emptiness or direct realization of emptiness. Um, in general, it only can happen as a human being. And it does seem contradictory that if you were practicing a spiritual path as a form realm god or formless realm god, then that is a upper rebirth. You should have more capacity, right? Ideally or conceptually. But according to very clearly in the teachings of the Buddha, it's not possible. It goes on to say, this goes on to the next point as well. Inhabitants of the continent of Uttarakuru are unsuitable as basis for vows, which is why the other bases of the other continents are praised, and among them especially inhabitants of Jambudvipa, so our realm of existence, right? Our universe. The other types of birth, you aren't even, for instance, in order to achieve Vinaya, Pratimoksha vows, you have to be a human. Only human beings are a suitable basis for Pratimoksha vows, right? Or beings from Jambudvipa, and human beings from Jambudvipa. So there are uncommon qualities of being a human being born in the universe we are. And that's one of them. And so the same thing with the direct realization of emptiness is that there's something about being born as a form realm god or a formless realm god that even if you are motivated to practice Dharma, there's still something about that type of rebirth that is making it impossible for you. There's an obstacle that is inherent with that type of rebirth that makes it impossible to have a direct realization of emptiness. Or excuse me, a newly realized direct realization of emptiness. If you previously already realized emptiness, then that's different, right? Um, so I agree. It sounds a little bit contradictory. It does seem a little strange, but there's something inherent about being born in that realm that realm itself is an obstacle to that.
Venerable.
I don't have a better explanation for that. Sorry. Yes, Sangeeta.
So, just further to what I think Shagun asked. So, I always have this confusion. So, when you talk about the four concentrations of the form realm, and then you have those four levels of infinite space, infinite consciousness,
Yeah.
peak of existence. So, this is where you're talking about the eight jhanas, right? The four jhanas in
Yeah.
the form realm.
Mhm.
So, isn't this that the form realm fourth concentration? It actually goes step by step to infinite space, infinite consciousness. So it is. So you mentioned that after fourth concentration, they can fall back into a
Yeah.
desire realm
So
without incrementally going higher and higher into formal realm. So there are higher levels of concentration and
yeah.
realizations. So I
So
was very confused as to.
it's confusing because those 8 levels of concentration, we can achieve them as humans, right? So you don't even have to be Buddhist. To achieve those 8 levels of concentration, you don't have to be Buddhist. Anyone can achieve them. It's just a matter of taming your mind. And then let's say you achieve the first one, right? The first concentration of the form realm. By achieving that in this life, that creates the karma then in a future life to be reborn in the first formless realm, the first form realm as a form realm god of the first level, right? And so the realization of those levels of understanding or jnana, right? Those can be achieved on anybody. But then being reborn in those realms is different than achieving those realizations. Do you see? So the long life God isn't someone that has simply achieved the fourth form realm concentration. It is someone actually born in the fourth form realm.
Okay, so when Buddha's two teachers, Udreka and who's that? Udara Kalama or whatever, the two first teachers, when he started learning with both of them consequently, both had achieved all the 8 levels as human beings. So they had achieved those 8 levels
Correct.
without actually being born in the formless realm. So as a human
Correct.
being, they had achieved all the 8.
Oh, yeah,
That's
exactly.
confusing. Okay.
Yeah, it is confusing. But what's useful to remember is that by achieving those 8 is what creates the karma to be reborn as those types of God, right? It's not guaranteed, but that is how you would achieve the karma to be reborn as a form God or a formless realm God, is by achieving a form realm concentration or a formless realm concentration. And to achieve those 8, you do achieve them sequentially, right? Because they build on
Yeah.
one another, right?
Right.
And then they even say when you practice, there is a type of practice that you do where you first, in our meditation, when you've achieved all 8, once you've done that, you would then engage in a level of concentration that is the first form realm concentration. And then you would concentrate on, anyway, I won't go into that now. But there's a type of concentration, a type of meditative practice where you concentrate on the coarsest type of thing you can meditate on, and then the most subtle type of thing you meditate on. And you go back and forth to train your mind. And you go all the way up and then all the way back down again in a meditation session. Once you've achieved all 8, to really refine your capacity to meditate. So achieving those concentrations is something we can do. By achieving them, then we develop the karma, or we accumulate the karma that could cause us to be reborn in those upper realms. However, if you achieve those concentrations through Buddhist practice and you combine them with the wish to be reborn as a human, then that karma may not ripen as you being reborn as an upper realm God or as a formless realm God, because your desire is to be reborn as a human so you continue practicing the Dharma in a more meaningful way, right? So you may have achieved that karma. When we talk about karma, we say there's negative karma, there is positive karma. That when we talk about contaminated karma, right? There is karma that's free of contamination, which is a whole different ball game. But contaminated karma, which is what we accumulate, there is negative karma, there is positive karma, which is also called merit, and then there is changeable karma, which is what it's called. And changeable karma is the karma that has the result of being reborn in one of the upper realms. In one of the form or formless realms as a god, right? So to accumulate that karma means you've achieved those constant levels of concentration as a human, or as however you achieve them, right? But again, achieving those 8 is not even an uncommon Buddhist thing. Non-Buddhists can achieve them, meditating on a different object. Okay.
Thank you, Andrew.
It's 7:30. Yeah, it's 7:30. I don't want to keep you late. I think this last section, let me see. I don't want to rush through anything because this last section is just I'll read through it, and if there are doubts, we can talk about them next week. The last section is reinforcing the last 2 sections, reinforcing how important it is to recognize our basis, which is a basis of freedom and endowment. So he says, consequently, why would I act in such a way that an excellent basis like the one I have gained, does not have a result, right? So now that I've done all this work to achieve this, and we'll talk about that in the next section, but I've done all this work to achieve a perfect human rebirth, why would I not use it? If I do not make it meaningful, could there be a greater self-betrayal and a bigger stupidity? Having passed through so many perilous places of unfreedom, such as the lower realms, again and again, if I were to go back to those places, forsaking this one-off liberation as meaningless, it would be like turning mindless, as though being stupefied by a magic spell. So this is just reminding us of how incredibly rare and difficult it is to achieve a human birth that is endowed with the 18 freedoms and endowments, right? And so here it's called a one-off liberation. We often see that in the language. I've achieved this perfect human rebirth only once. That is just an exaggeration, right? We don't achieve it only once, but it's so rare and so difficult to achieve. It's as if we've achieved it only once, and there's no guarantee for achieving it again. Now, however, on the flip side of that is, once we realize that we're committing ourselves to Dharma practice, we are upping our chances, incredibly. Like that's the whole purpose of our practice, right? So we should recognize the incredible opportunities we have in this life. We shouldn't waste them. But we also shouldn't say, well, if I don't do everything perfect in this life, then it's over for me, right? Because that's not a useful attitude. as long as we are working the best we can and engaging in spiritual study and practice in a meaningful way, then we are creating all of the conditions to have a perfect human rebirth again, even though it is incredibly rare. And we'll talk about that next week or our next class. But there are three main causes for a perfect human rebirth, right? And the most important one is moral discipline, is not engaging in non-virtuous actions. And then engaging in virtuous activities such as generosity, and then having stainless prayers to be reborn with a perfect human rebirth. Those are the three main causes, and we'll talk about them in our next class. But as long as we keep those in mind, then we can say, yes, this perfect human rebirth is incredibly rare. All the teachings, they say it's found only once and never found again. Like that's the language that's used to emphasize how rare it is. But if we are actively working to have strong moral discipline, ethical discipline, to avoid the 10 non-virtuous actions, if we are engaging in accumulating merit through things such as generosity, especially, and if we are making stainless prayers, especially when we dedicate, right? When we dedicate, may I be reborn as a perfect human rebirth and quickly meet a Mahayana spiritual friend so I can continue on my path towards Buddhahood in my future lives. May all those who have passed away, such as those who, even those who I don't know, such as, there was this terrible earthquake or double earthquake recently in Venezuela, right? May all those who have passed away quickly find perfect human rebirths and meet with Mahayana spiritual friends so that they might quickly and more quickly achieve Buddhahood, right? So stainless prayers are important for our achievement of a perfect human rebirth. So those are the three main causes. So even though the language says it's only achieved once, that's to emphasize the rareness of it. But as long as we're working on our own spiritual growth and practice, we can have some, we don't want to be arrogant, right? But we can have some level of confidence that we're moving in the direction of having another perfect human rebirth. The danger of that belief is then it can make you lazy, right? So you can't be like, well, I can do it next time. Because as soon as you have that belief, then you've gotten rid of the causes for a perfect human rebirth, right? So I say that because I don't want us to despair and say, I'm not doing everything perfect, therefore it's all worthless. That despair is not useful. We need the recognition that we're working in the right direction. But we just have to, always be on our toes in a non-negative way, in a celebratory way, right? So then he gives some verses from the Bodhicharyavatara to emphasize this point. So by having thoughts like these, that if I were to waste this life, it would be like I had become mindless due to being stupefied by a spell. Having thoughts like these, then you should meditate again and again. In engaging the bodhisattva conduct by Shantideva, it says, having found this is not correct. Having found this life of leisure, not to cultivate what's virtuous, no betrayal could be any greater, and nothing is more deluded than that. And, having found this place so rare, hard to find and beneficial, if I, well aware of it, were to be led to that hell again as though deluded by magic spells, has my mind here wasted away? Through what delusion I do not know either. Goodness, what has become of my mind? And this is all just saying, if I recognize how incredibly beneficial this perfect human rebirth is, and I don't use it, then what could be more foolish? If I recognize through these teachings that it's incredibly rare to have the opportunities and the resources I have, both whether that be physical resources, environmental resources, emotional resources, mental resources, spiritual resources, I have all these things and I don't use them. That's the equivalent of buying a first-class ticket to a lower realm. So why would I do that? That's so foolish, right? So that's what he is pointing out here. And I think we'll leave it there because we're already going quite late. I apologize for keeping you past time. If there are any really important questions, we can ask them now. Otherwise, we'll save them for next week. Okay. So thank you for spending this time with me, everyone. I appreciate all of you. Hopefully, I slowed down enough that I didn't go too fast. I do apologize. I have a tendency to go quickly. When you receive teachings, our teachings here at the monastery, we cover so many pages a day sometimes. I have one teacher who's incredibly quick. He's like that. You have to always be ready to catch every single word he says. I have another teacher who's goes a little more slowly. But so you just get into a habit of going through things quickly and not being able to read the room because of this digital distance. I apologize if I move too quickly. And I do forget that my first language is English, and that is not the case for all, if not most of you. So I apologize. I appreciate the feedback, right? If I'm going too quickly or if there's any other thing happening that is not making this as useful for you as possible, then that feedback is welcome. It may not be something we can change depending on what it is, but the whole point of this class, or all of our classes, is that we all move closer to Buddhahood, that we all have a deeper understanding of the teachings of the Buddha, that we all understand Tsongkhapa's position, and we learn how to apply it to our everyday lives, and we learn the techniques that allow us to read these texts on our own and then still get something meaningful out of them. Those are all the things that we're trying to do together. So if there's something happening that's making that more difficult for you, then let's try to overcome it together, right? That's definitely a fair thing to bring up. So don't be afraid of that. I know I personally won't take it personally, and I know no one at the center will either. It may not be something we can change depending on what it is, but the whole point is that we're moving towards Buddhahood together, right? And so we want to create the best conditions for that as possible.
And Venerable, rather our apologies for being slow and maybe a little, though having been studied Lamrim, but then also maybe our apologies for being slow actually.
No. There's no need to apologize for being slow. That there's no need to apologize for that at all. That's the whole point of these classes. If you already knew all of this, then there wouldn't be any point to these classes, right? So there's no need to apologize at all. I'm very appreciative that I have this chance to share this Dharma with all of you to the best of my ability. So we're just trying to maximize that for all of us. Okay, with that, let us offer some quick dedication prayers. So just realize that through our practice today of study and concentration and contemplation, we have accumulated some merit. And instead of keeping that merit just for ourselves, we generate the wish that wants to give that merit away. We want to give that merit away, that it might ripen on all sentient beings, that they may be free from suffering. All those who are suffering in body and mind, might this merit ripen in their freedom from that suffering. All those who have passed away, especially those who have passed away in traumatic conditions, such as the recent earthquake, may they more quickly achieve perfect rebirths and meet Mahayana spiritual friends. May all those who are working to promote the Dharma and to promote spiritual life have all the resources they need to continue teaching the Dharma. And may our gurus continue to display long and healthy lives, that they may continue to lead us out of samsara. May all the Dharma centers continue to receive patronage and support, so they may continue the good work of sharing the Dharma and making the Dharma accessible. And may we ourselves quickly and more quickly achieve perfect, complete Buddhahood that will maximize our capacity to be of service to others, and that we might not only be free from suffering for ourselves, but lead all sentient beings to that state of perfect and unending bliss. So with that dedication, we'll offer these prayers. We'll offer the first verse once in Tibetan, and then in English, and then we'll continue in English. Choe Khor Sum Ling Ma ke panam ke gyorchi ke wanyam pa me payang gone gondu pe sho. May the supreme jewel of bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow. May that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good, all-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso. Please remain until samsara ends. Savior of the snowland teachings and transmigratory beings, who makes extremely clear the path that is the unification of emptiness and compassion, to the lotus holder, Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. May the glorious Guru's lives be long and stable. May all beings, equally in the extent of space, have happiness. May I and others, without exception, accumulate merit, purify negativities, and may we be blessed to quickly attain Buddhahood. Great. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
Venerable.
Venerable.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Venerable.
everyone,
Thank you.
for
Thank you
joining us
so
and for your
much.
discussion. I'll do a
Yes,
quick
Venerable.
reminder on the program. Or would you like
Yeah,
to
go
do it,
ahead.
Venerable?
No, you
We
go ahead.
have,
Yeah.
so tomorrow in the center, CKSL Bangalore, we have a little bit of cleaning and community time for those of you who are able to come and spend time together, which is great. And then next week, we continue with the second part of the special program on the Vajrakatra Sutra with Venerable Tenzin Namjong. And if you are able to join on Monday, just after, which is, I think, the 6th of July, which is the birthday of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, there is going to be a Vajrakatra Sutra reading, and I think maybe some additional practices that will be also available online. Yes, so that's the next 1.5 weeks covered, and for the rest, please look up online what happens like that. Great to see all of you turning regularly. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day or the day ahead of you. I think some of you are joining from Brazil. So thank you.
Thank you, Alice.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks, Alice. Thanks, everyone.